This is Outcomes, a show about uncovering the hundreds of micro-innovations that help make Australia's healthcare system one of the best in the world. On the show, you'll meet the doers, the Australian clinicians, care workers and healthcare professionals driving the micro-changes we seek to showcase. Theirs are the stories we're here to tell. I'm your host, Will Egan, and I'm the CEO of AusMed Education. I'm really passionate about improving the health and prosperity of the people in my community. I believe Australia does have a great health system, and every conversation we have on this show highlights why. Today, I'm joined by Andrea Waring. Andrea has held a variety of roles across the Australian healthcare system throughout her career, including a stint as a residential aged care facility manager. In more recent years, however, she has worked at an executive level and is currently the Quality Advisor at ACCPA, the Aged and Community Care Providers Association of Australia. Andrea's extensive experience in the healthcare sector, especially in aged care, really comes to the fore in this episode. She explains how working on continuous improvement initiatives is critical and provides a case study example of how to use technology to streamline some of the work surrounding this department. She also highlights the importance of engaging with clients or consumers of a service in partnerships for care. I love the example she provides of including a cup of tea with a resident as a part of an induction program. I hope you enjoy this episode as much as I did. Let's jump in. Andrea, thanks for being on the show.
It's a pleasure, William. Thank you for inviting me.
No worries. So tell us a little bit about your storied career in healthcare.
Wow, it goes back a few decades. I commenced my nursing career back in the United Kingdom back in 1990. I qualified as a registered nurse. Prior to that, I did 3 years as an AIN, assistant in nursing, and predominantly in gynecology and aged care. And I kept looking at the other nurses who were taking out Redivac drains and doing things, and I was like, oh, I could do this. Why am I staying at this level? I'm going to do this. And then I got the bug and decided to train as a registered nurse, and I've never looked back. And I've had a really, really interesting and dynamic career with many opportunities. A lot of in the UK has been around outpatient department management or managing a blood and apheresis unit.
Is that predominantly in the acute care sector?
Yeah. So you imagine if you come to give blood, I'd be the one that would be training and supporting the staff who are doing the venipuncture and taking the apheresis and managing the medical team, and huge responsibility. But anything people focused, and I'm happy. Anything where I get to meet people from all walks of life, all backgrounds, it makes me very happy if I can give them good care and good outcomes. So I've done a lot of different things. I've done some less senior roles where I've been in the community and visited people in their home and helped them with their diabetes management or just do wound care. I've also done the other kind of roles where I've managed teams and I've been much more senior and managed areas of patient safety and quality, which has been more so in the space of when I moved to Australia in 2004. And that's where I've found where my strongest passion lies, with reviewing processes, systems, looking at the standards, looking how an organisation can change the way they do things without having to do a huge amount of expense or output of staff or whatever, and make a significant difference to the way they work and the outcomes for the consumer, whoever they may be.
That's fantastic. That's exactly what we're trying to highlight on this show, ways to improve the operations of a service, in particular for the purpose of improving outcomes that the consumer receives without needing to do massive transformations. Was most of your work since 2004, has that continued to be in the acute care sector?
It's been some of the acute. So I spent 2.5 years in the Torres and Cape Hospital and Health Service as a patient safety manager, and absolutely loved that, and transitioned from there into the aged care space where I managed a facility of 132 beds, aged care facility in Cairns for 4 years with a very reputable company that are now known as Bolton Clark, who I have a great deal of respect for. They're awesome. They are one of the best providers out there. And I really learned a lot about the aged care sector in that first sort of 4-year role as a manager there. And it was really enlightening. But I think what I learned most about was I kind of questioned, why are we doing it this way? You can go along for the ride, Will, where you do everything the same as everybody else does. There are systems there that everybody's doing, whoever the provider. But I kept saying, well, I don't get why we're doing it this way. Why are we not looking at it differently? Why are we not trying different ways and different approaches and using IT and things like that to our benefit, and using the people that you actually have in your teams, whether they're carers, whether they're kitchen hands, whether they're your chef, whether they're the cleaners. The best ideas come from them that are doing the jobs every day, that are working with the residents every day. That's where some great ideas come from. And we need to give them credit for that.
Yeah, I think we're going to get some of those ideas from you shortly. But before we do, tell us about the last 5 years of your career, because I think it's been quite interesting as you've moved further up into that senior management role as a consultant now, supporting multiple providers from a quality and an accreditation standpoint. Is that correct?
Yes, I've done kind of a mixed approach. I've sort of set up working for myself, but in between sort of obligations which may be permanent or just permanent contracts for like maternity leave cover. So I've had that variety of being my own boss and when and where I want to do it, which is a great luxury. But sometimes you miss that feeling that you belong to a team. So I like to mix it up a little bit. So I've done some really, really rewarding quality and safety focused roles. For example, a general manager of quality and safety or quality and compliance at Montefiore, and another one as the governance manager in another organisation. And when I've done that, I've always felt I want to always give 150% in whichever role or capacity I do it. And I always want to learn and give something back. So I get something, I learn some new skills, and I always give something back to the organisation. That's where I've come up with some of my innovative ideas that are simple to implement with little expense and little effort, maybe a bit of time involved,
Yeah.
but not necessarily pushing your budget out there or meaning you have to employ another person. And that's what I like.
I think it's okay to spend time doing these types of things. I remember an advertiser once saying to me, no one likes a Teflon experience because if it doesn't stick, it won't keep happening. So there needs to be some good friction. And I think time and effort is part of that. We've all got time in some regard, but once we start moving into those other constraints like funding or resource overall, those hurdles are a little bit harder to overcome. But without further ado, I think we're all keen to hear what your first idea is that you'd like to share.
Looking at the flow of how someone comes into aged care and also the current challenges we see with recruitment and retention of skilled staff, making aged care an attractive business to work in, looking at the services we provide, what is unique about us as an aged care provider compared to other aged care providers out there? What's our USP? What's our unique selling point? I was trying to come up with ideas when I was working as a facility manager a few years ago, and one of them was before the government changes, the government reforms gave such a strong focus on the consumer, and it always has been a high focus on consumers, but even more so now, and their engagement in how things happen where they live, what happens at the home, what makes it their home, what's their voice, how do they get to have a say. I wanted to invite a lovely 93-year-old onto our orientation program as a speaker. So the idea was that we all have orientation for new staff where you've got HR, payroll, code of conduct, things like that. But no one was inviting a consumer to talk to them. So I said to this lovely lady, would you please have a chat with them and just simply sit with them for half an hour, have a cup of tea, maybe a biscuit, have a chat, tell them what it's like to live in aged care, why this is your home, what makes it your home, what do you like, how do you like people to treat you, but from your perspective, and very relaxed. And she was a bit daunted at first, but she was sort of thinking she got to stand on a pedestal and do a speech. I said, no, just be yourself. You don't have to say any particular specific wording. Just say who you are and what makes you happy here. Then hopefully that will help the new staff, the new care staff, understand what it's like to be a consumer in an aged care facility.
That's a fantastic idea. Did you need to provide much kind of coaching or support to this lady, or some talking points, or did you find that the conversations started to flow quite freely?
I didn't have to coach. It was more that once she knew it wasn't formal, it was kind of very informal over a cup of tea. She was fine. She wasn't unhappy about doing something like that. It was something that I hope they carried on after I left. It was kind of in its infancy, the idea. But yeah, she just needed me to go to, she lived in like this little, what they used to call cottage area, and I go and sit with her for a cup of tea now and again and have a chat anyway. And I just wanted her to feel reassured that if she ever didn't want to do it, she wouldn't be forced to do it. She could back out at any time, and she felt very reassured. She was just nervous, but it's just a simple idea.
Very simple, but very powerful. And how quickly, as part of the induction, would that happen? Is it something that would happen on the first day or within the first week?
I think generally you have to pick the day of your induction where you've got not too many heavy topics, because if you've got those where you need a lot of attention span, like where you're listening to people giving you a talk about, I don't know, HR or whatever, payroll, you just got to pick your place for where you want that kind of more relaxed discussions to happen, more informal. So usually probably within the first 1 to 2 weeks of orientation, depending on your capacity and how many staff are attending, and also on her as well. I mean, if she wasn't well, then she didn't attend. And there were very few other consumers that wanted to participate, sadly. So it's kind of finding the right consumer with the right mindset that wants to do it.
Why do you think that is? That's an interesting observation. Why would there be other consumers who aren't wanting to engage in that way with the people who are providing them care in their home in a residential aged care setting?
I think some of them feel they don't have a voice and they're not listened to, which is sad to say, but I do think some of them feel that way. And some of them still, even now, live in an aged care setting and feel it's still institutionalized, which is not what we want. We want it to feel more homely and feel that they can be very open about anything they want to talk about, whether it's, how they feel today, or whether that they're feeling depressed or suicidal. Any topic should not be off the table with them. But it's having that confidence in themselves, because it must be hard. I mean, I've never had to live in a facility, but I worked there, and I try to put myself in their shoes every day when I've been at work to say, how would I feel if I was in their position? You're taken away from your whole independence, aren't you? You're not at home anymore. You're not surrounded by your loved ones. It's a real challenge to adjust. So I think a lot of people some are shy and don't want to get involved. And then you get the extremes where they're extremely vocal, but they tend to vocalise through complaint processes rather than getting on board to form part of the solutions together.
Yeah, that's interesting. So maybe they don't see these types of activities as a channel that they actually have access to have influence. So resort to the complaints process, perhaps. But what was the feedback from the new starters?
Well, it only sort of started as I was moving out of that role, so I can't give you as much feedback as I'd like to, but from the ones that were aware of it happening, the care staff were very open to it. They were very receptive, and I think that, sadly, probably the lady's passed away now because it was quite a few years ago. And as I say, I hope that they adopted it, but I'm not sure if the process continued. I can't obviously comment because I don't work there anymore. But these kind of ideas germinate from everywhere and from everyone. It's just sometimes we don't jump on them and put them into action.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that's a nice segue to talk about, where do these types of ideas come from? What is the place or the systems, processes, the methodical practices that you've seen in subsequent years where people can go looking for ideas like this?
For me, I've had such a long career history, and a lot of that's been aged care focused or healthcare focused that's not hospitalised, that I feel I'm seeing the same problems today that I saw decades ago, which concerns me. And so that's why I kind of think differently. And I kind of don't want to just do the same number crunching or take people off the floor to do the same spreadsheets and the same data analysis and collect that information and interpret it the same way every time that everybody else does. Because all of that time that you take to do that is time taken away from resident care, or even just chatting to a resident, not even doing care delivery, but when do we talk to them anymore? And I find that's quite a huge concern for me. And I think that there are others out there like me, a lot of others that are at different levels of their career. There may be an AIN, there may be a cleaner, there may be a nurse, there may be a doctor, whatever, but they don't always pause a minute and look at what they're doing and how they're doing it and go, can I do this any better? Is this the best way? I don't know. Maybe it's just something that quality people tend to look at. I know a lot of quality officers, quality managers, we always think this way. We're always looking at better ways to do things. But we need to foster that in other people and how they approach things, not just accept things for what they are, especially in an era of so much legislation now and so many changes and so much reporting we have to do. How much time can you imagine that takes us away from the residents, Will?
Absolutely. I think that's one of the examples that I think is quite novel in how you've approached the Plan for Continuous Improvement, the PCI, to that point where you've tried to avoid a scenario where people are reproducing that same document on one hand, but on the other, sharing it in a way where more people can use it. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so that was recently a wonderful organisation I worked for, 16-month maternity contract. They had an organisational level PCI and then a PCI within each of their residential homes, so 4 individual PCIs. They were very manually intensive, using Excel spreadsheets and entering data in, data out. And I was kind of thinking that surely there's a way we can do this better. So much time and effort of the senior managers of each home, as well as the executive level reviewing it. So I thought about putting it into a SharePoint site, because IT, I love IT. It really floats my boat. I really enjoy IT and thinking, what can it do for us, rather than seeing it as a problem and more, I've got to learn this system. What can the system do for you? So I approached the IT department, who were incredible, incredible people, and said, look, how can we make this and build this into a SharePoint site so that everyone across the organisation anytime could go in, add their idea and improvement, align it to the standards, put in their progress. Anyone at executive level can go in as a helicopter view and have a look. And an auditor can come in and be shown the last 6 months of your improvements, a glance, and see what you're doing very easily. And that's what we built. Then we got rid of all of the Excel spreadsheets and just had it all in a SharePoint site.
That's fantastic. How long did that take?
Oh, gosh, well, it took a few weeks, depending on the availability of the IT team and the availability of our quality team, because we had to provide a skeleton of what we wanted it to look like. So probably not too many weeks, 2 to 3 weeks, but then we trialed it as well with one of the homes, got some feedback, did some tweaking, ironed out some glitches. And I think what was really nice is the outcome was you could see that the engagement level had gone up by about 45%. There were so many PCIs on there. I've never seen so many, because I've been an auditor as well, and I've never seen so many examples.
So that's your measure of engagement? Was it the number that was being added or completed?
It's the number added, so the number of ideas, but also the number that were actually implemented was also increasing. And it was coming from all over the business, all aspects, whether it was catering, whether it was cleaning, whether it was maintenance, which is even nicer than just seeing them all sitting in the clinical space, which is wonderful.
How would people submit those? Did you build an online form as part of that process, or was that paper as well?
You could link it to a Word form that's automated, but you could go straight into the actual share page itself and add it directly through what the IT department had actually built in the back end. So it gave you choices. So if it was against you could click your standards, which your standards were. It could tell you, put your title in. It could align everything to however many standards, and then you could put a free text box. So they built it from the Word-based document into the actual electronic version. Very easy to use, very visual, and you could get some very good reports out of it. So when we had an aged care assessor visit, they actually commented that they'd never seen an electronic one ever. All the time it's been like a Word version or an Excel version, and they loved it, absolutely loved it.
How long ago was this?
Well, I left that role sadly left that role in February earlier this year. So it was in the last 12 months.
So still quite recent. So it'd be fair to assume that there's still not a digital record or software that's able to support this use case at this stage either.
I would say there's still a lot of providers out there still doing it the old way.
The paper way.
Yeah.
Or the word file way.
Yeah, exactly.
So unpack this a little bit for us. So you have this idea and you're in the quality department, and now you've got to get stakeholder buy-in. You've got to convince someone in IT to work on this instead of another project. How did you go about that?
Well, it certainly did involve a few stakeholders, because obviously you've got to, out of respect, talk to people like the Director of Residential Care, because this is a change that would impact his residential managers and care managers as well, and the staff that are going to be putting the data into the PCI. It also affected my line manager. I needed, out of courtesy, to involve her, as well as my quality team. And to be honest, it didn't take a lot to get it to grow legs, because the minute I mentioned it, they loved the idea. Everybody could see the benefit of the idea. Everybody could see how much less time and effort it would take, and also how much more visible it would be to kind of go, how many PCIs have we got in standard 1? Which standard do we need to improve upon? Is it standard 3, 2? Is it actually governance standard 8 that we need to improve upon? So they really bought into it very quickly. It wasn't challenging, Will.
That's rewarding. So you take that then to the IT team and you say, everybody wants this done, including quality. What happens next? How did they engage with you?
Well, obviously, each IT department has significant projects and things going on all at once. So you can't just say, drop everything and let us go ahead with this now. It was a priority risk approach. So I have to say their CIO, an incredible guy, his name's Rudy, very cooperative, very approachable. And he, at that level, did a lot of the back end as well himself, in between his other projects, because he realised how passionate we all were about having this done, but we didn't put pressure on him. We just said, look, when you're able, please let us know when we can start the project. But we kind of did it initially in dribs and drabs when he got availability, but his team was very small. So to take his other team members off other huge projects wasn't easy for him. So it was just a real collaborative approach.
It sounds like you did it in a little bit of a stealth mode as well. And obviously, my background is in this space, software. I think that what I'm hearing here as well is that he may have asked you to prototype it in Word or Excel initially. So effectively engaging you in a kind of co-design process, saying, well, if you can lay out what you're envisaging, given we're not procuring software here, we don't need a tender requirements list or anything like that. I'll partner with you to actually build this application in stealth mode because it sounds exciting and sounds innovative, and that's kind of getting my juices flowing and simple.
Yeah, and I had to give credit to my quality department and the team I had working with me. I had some very innovative, exciting, free-thinking individuals that worked for me. That they were excellent at helping in building the back end and saying what we want it to look like, as well as its function. But yeah, you got that in a nutshell. You're probably much more articulate at that than me, Will, having that IT background, I have to say. But amazing people and very, very rewarding to work with them.
Maybe it's just the jargon, to be honest, is what a lot of IT people are purveyors of jargon. But tell me about the business case. Was there any way to quantify the impact of this, even though it sounds like a small project from a resourcing standpoint and such that it may not cost a huge amount in terms of people's time? It sounds like it would add a huge amount of value. So maybe the ROI here would be quite high. Did you look into that at all?
Well, we didn't have to draft a full business case proposal for it, which was nice. It was just like a light bulb moment in life. where you just go, oh my God, it literally was. I was sat there and a light bulb went on. I just thought, can we do this in SharePoint? Wow. And that was it. And then it just went from there. So we didn't have to do any written business proposal. We didn't have to do any costings. We didn't have to do any analysis. It was just like a germinating seed going, well, is this going to grow into a tree, or is it just going to die from the minute it starts? It was kind of stress-free for me. It was just a beautiful moment.
How about after the fact? So it goes live, and I'd love to hear what you had to do to roll this out and engage the facility managers. And it sounds like the entire workforce. Tell us a little bit about that.
So we had to first have one of the service provider homes, because we got 4 aged care homes at the time, to trial it. So one of them volunteered to trial it. They trialed it for a month and gave us the feedback, and we made some changes accordingly. But they really found it very user-friendly and easy once they navigated and got the head around how different it looked in the SharePoint space, because we're not all IT savvy. Some people, a SharePoint site or an intranet site really scares them. You know, there may be people in their late 60s or late 50s, and they really don't even know how to operate a computer. And lots of our staff now in aged care are non-English speaking. So you have that challenge of language, don't you? That challenge of understanding both verbal and written language. So we did that first, and then we also held regular general meetings where we always discussed quality and compliance, and we shared things live through MS Team meetings or on-site meetings to educate people how to use it, to get feedback from them, to say, you know, what are the pain points, to add and provide coaching and teaching, so that they also felt as well that they were never alone. If they didn't know something, they could always reach out to the team, get support, give us a call, ask one of us to come to the home and talk them through it. I think it's about that ongoing relationship. When you introduce something new or a different way of working, don't just do it and walk away. Keep going back and saying, how's it going? Is it working well? Can we change? Can we help you with anything? So it was not just, oh, we've done this, we've brought the idea in, thank you, goodbye. It's like an ongoing relationship, isn't it, around that what you've changed, that process.
Absolutely. And it kind of forms part of the culture of the organisation thereafter, I think.
Yeah, embedding it into the whole organisation and making sure that you are there as a support department to ask and answer their questions.
So you've taken a document that stems from a regulatory requirement, and is it the case that it's typically produced for a regulatory need and not necessarily used in the way that it should be in an organisation?
It is definitely a regulatory requirement. So every organisation must have a plan for continuous improvement.
That's under the Aged Care Quality and Safety Commissions.
Yes.
When you say any organisation, would an acute care provider or a disability service provider need to have one?
Well, the NDIS are required to have sort of a similar document aligned to the practice standards, the NDIS practice standards. Home care come under the aged care standards now, so they're under the same standards as residential. Hospital and health services come under different sets of standards, like the NHQHS standards is the National Hospital Standards.
National Safety Quality Health Standards?
Yeah. So, but they also are expected to have a PCI, because if you think about it, you should always want to improve. Whatever you're doing, you should always want to improve, and those ideas may be systems related or they may be actually more clinical related, but you should always be looking to improve in everything you do, because it improves the outcomes for the consumer.
Absolutely. So listeners, I think, should know under each regulatory framework there may be different requirements, but that this approach benefits all in all sectors, not just in an aged care setting. What have you done with that next around external stakeholders?
Oh, I think the thing is with external stakeholders as well, it's about how are we going to grow that relationship with our contractors and things like that, because we find in aged care we might have contracted laundry providers, we might have contracted gardeners, we might have contracted maintenance people, and they may equally be interviewed by the assessors. especially people who are external cleaning companies that come in and do all the day-to-day cleaning at the residential care homes, that we need to not forget to involve them in ideas around continuous improvement and also get them on board for the journey about preparing for accreditation visits, because they can be interviewed and they often are interviewed.
How would you propose engaging external providers, companies like the laundry, catering companies, even software vendors or education companies like Osmed?
I think for me, it's about having an open door where you invite them to meet and greet and get to know your service and look at how you can have a mutual rapport and relationship, because it's kind of hard, especially if I think like people in systems and IT. If you've got a great system, then there are a lot out there, Will, but how do you get a foot in the door to talk to a residential provider about your system? Because there are so many, they don't want to listen. They don't want to talk to someone new because they're very busy. They're very time poor. And it's kind of thinking, being more open and aware that they may have a great system that can truly change the way you operate and give them a chance to talk to you about it. So open your doors to them, be more receptive to them, invite them into some of your meetings, invite them into your networks. But I'm not quite sure that everybody sees it the same way I see it.
Yeah, I think that last point's quite interesting. And I think I'm curious to know as to whether you've ever given a PCI item to an external provider, because I think sometimes the ideas that are coming through might actually be limited by, well, this is laundry, this isn't something that we can control. Have you ever had a PCI item that you've effectively handed to the supplier and said, could you deliver on this?
I think it's an interesting concept, and I don't think it's something we should not try. And obviously, you've got certain aspects of your business and things and how they operate that you may or may not want to share with an external contractor. But ultimately, I think there's more and more services like home care, especially, where they have subcontracted services coming in. If someone's in their home, they need a gardener. Someone's in their home, you might be providing the carer, but you're the one that's subcontracting a gardener to come in and mow the lawn. So those relationships are very important. It's not just about kind of, well, this is the way we do business and this is the way you do business. It's the way we do business together and how we improve together, isn't it? And what ideas we have together. Just because they don't work for you directly as an employee doesn't mean the importance of the relationship isn't there.
I agree. And I think that it also doesn't mean that the aged care provider is able to singularly or solely deliver on all of the ideas and suggestions that come through. I think that a vendor to that aged care provider or supplier to that aged care provider is part of the service. They are part of that service, even if they're 1 degree removed.
Yeah, that's right.
So tell us a little bit about the changes that you've made to the self-assessment process that you've run previously.
I like writing self-assessments. I'm probably a bit of a sick woman, but I quite enjoy them. I've seen a few over the years. So the self-assessment document is another requirement for the Aged Care Commission when you're a new provider or a re-accrediting under the 3-year cycle. And I'm not discrediting any service provider, but a lot of the time it may be that the quality department or someone in the quality department just writes it on their own, and it's kind of very not as collaborative as it could be, and it's not always truly aligned to the standards. And more recently, with one of the providers that I worked for in New South Wales, I literally wrote I think it was 3 self-assessments that were due. And a lot of the time in the format, you see them in bullet points against each standard. So you might write 1 line, 2 lines against a bullet point, and then you put a PCI at the bottom. I took it up a notch. Took me quite a while, but I literally broke down, what does the organisation do? What's the business process? What's the systems that they use? What's the actual policy and procedure that relates to this standard? And I referenced it, and I put links into things, and I put screenshots in of consumer feedback examples. And I from a system called CarePage, which I have to say is an excellent system. And I built a lot of content. But what I realized I created is a document that was really a great picture of how that business works, how it operates. And if you keep that document live by reviewing it monthly, the document's always ready for your reaccreditation period, for your resubmission. And it's a great tool to actually also teach others how your business functions, at different levels in your organisation, executive level or non-exec level. So I think there's an opportunity for providers to change the way they approach and use the self-assessment.
Yeah, so I think in both this case with the self-assessment and the PCI, I think what you're doing is taking these really useful, hence why they're regulatory requirements, practices and processes that lead to a set of documentation, but then turning those into living, breathing, used parts of the culture of that facility or organization in terms of how it operates, and not just letting them become reporting requirements for the purpose of a reaccreditation or an audit. Is that a summary?
That's exactly right, Will. But I think the other thing is it's seen by many as a chore, just another chore to do or another job to do. It's much more than that. It's quite an important document because as an assessor or an auditor, you have a look at that and it gives you a great picture of the organisation and you kind of go, wow, this organisation is really organised. They've got all their systems in place. They've got really good, strong policy documents in place. I know exactly as an assessor which documents I'm going to request to look at when I come to do your on-site audit. So it's reassuring and from a risk perspective. But if you get a self-assessment with very little in it, no content, 2 or 3 lines, it's more like a red flag.
Yeah, not much of a self-assessment.
Yes.
So I think on that note, I'd love to thank you for being on the show and sharing your many years of wisdom and experience across actually quite a broad set of working experiences in both Australian and the UK health systems. Maybe I'd love to give you the opportunity to tell us about what are you working on next? What's the next challenge that you want to help Australia's healthcare system solve, Andrea?
I wish I had a magic wand, Will. There'd be so many that I'd love to do by the touch of a magic wand, but I really want to still stay in the space of quality and compliance, and I really want to get the industry ready for the new standards that are coming in and stop people from worrying so much about on-site accreditation visits by auditors. Be prepared every day. Build it into what you do, living and breathing it every day. If you're doing good work, if you're providing good care, if you've got good systems, if you've got good policies, if your staff have got good education and knowledge and skills, then don't be afraid of having an audit visit because you're doing it every day anyway. You just need to embrace it. And it's part of your business of just coming to work and thinking about quality every single day.
Absolutely. I think they're nice, motivating words to finish on. So thank you so much for making the time to share your wisdom with all of us on the show.
It's a pleasure, Will. Thank you for asking me to come and join you.
Thanks, Andrea.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Outcomes, a show about uncovering the hundreds of micro-innovations that help make Australia's healthcare system one of the best in the world. This podcast is produced by AusMed, one of Australia's leading providers of educational content and software to the health, aged, disability, community and allied health sectors. To find out more, head to our website, ausmed.com.au. To make sure you don't miss an episode of Outcomes, be sure to subscribe to or follow the show in your favourite podcasting app. And while you're there, please leave us a 5-star review as it really helps others to find the show. I'm Will Egan, and I'll see you next time for another episode of Outcomes.